Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're taking a fascinating journey to discover a vibrant, brilliantly modern, and secular side of Ethiopia that challenges almost everything we assume in the West. If you think you know the story of this historically rich nation, get ready, because we're about to peel back the layers of romanticized history to reveal a deeply complex, living and breathing modern reality.
So let's dive right in. Picture this: chaotic, brilliantly modern energy, the dynamic lines, the abstraction. This is a detail from Mural, a 2009 piece by Ethiopian-born artist Julie Meheratu. And honestly, it's the perfect cover art for the source material we're unpacking today, because it hints at the deeply layered 20th century Ethiopian modernism we are about to uncover. It is definitely not some static ancient relic. It's a society in constant motion.
But to understand why this modernism catches so many of us off guard, we kind of have to look at the myth first. Langston Hughes wrote this famous quote, and it just perfectly captures that deeply entrenched, heavily romanticized, and frankly, distant view the Western world has held about Africa as a whole, and definitely Ethiopia. For decades, the West has looked at Ethiopia through this very specific, almost mythological lens.
Actually, I want you to honestly reflect for a second here. What do you see when you imagine Ethiopia? Are you strictly picturing sprawling ancient empires, uncolonized lands fiercely resisting European powers? Or maybe you picture the biblical home of the Queen of Sheba, or the spiritual epicenter of the Rastafarian movement, right? And while all of those elements are absolutely part of its rich tapestry, they often act as a veil. They obscure the modern reality of the people actually living there today.
To guide us through all this, we're going to follow the narrative of an editor from a literary journal who traveled to Addis Ababa in 2008. He was invited out there to help mount some creative writing workshops. And, just like a lot of us would be, he was fully expecting to find this mythic Ethiopia, a country steeped in its ancient, uncolonized glory, defined by emperors and early Christianity. He arrived with his imagination completely full of history, but not necessarily of the present.
And the crazy thing is, initially, the trip completely confirmed those ancient expectations. Before even leaving the US, our guide viewed the earliest known remains of human ancestors, Lucy, or as she's known in Ethiopia, Dinknesh. Then upon arriving, he marveled at these priceless, original, illuminated religious books dating all the way back to the 13th century, along with stunning processional crosses. It literally felt like walking through a living museum of human and religious history.
And this immersion into history became intensely physical too. Just imagine the sensory, out-of-breath experience of climbing the massive, sweeping marble stairways of Emperor Haile Selassie's former palace, which, by the way, now houses the Institute of Ethiopian Studies. Climbing those stairs at over 7,000 feet of altitude, it grounds all this abstract history in a very real, physical place. You can almost feel the weight of the emperors and courtiers who walked those exact steps.
But here comes the massive plot twist of this whole trip, and it was delivered casually over lunch. The eminent academic critic, Dr. Jonas Admasu, essentially dropped a bombshell on our visiting editor. He pointed out that Ethiopian culture is not just religious art. He revealed that secular literature written in Amharic, stuff focusing on everyday social and political concerns rather than celestial or religious ones, is entirely a 20th century phenomenon in Ethiopia.
So we're left with this stark contrast. On one side, we've got the mythic Ethiopia we all know, the one our editor totally expected to see, but on the other side is the hidden truth he actually discovered, a landscape of modern secular literature, severe political upheaval, and intense censorship. We really have to dismantle the myth of the country as just some ancient relic if we want to appreciate a modern nation of writers and intellectuals who are grappling with very real, dangerous 20th century struggles.
To truly understand the modern writers our guide was discovering, we have to look at the tumultuous history that shaped them. The 20th century in Ethiopia was incredibly transformative. It started with the shock of the Italian occupation in the 1930s, followed by the dramatic 1974 overthrow of the centuries-old monarchy under Haile Selassie. And that led straight into the violent, repressive Marxist military dictatorship known as the Derg regime throughout the 70s and 80s. During that time, simply being a writer was an act of perilous survival.
Now, this violent upheaval birthed the central conflict of modern Ethiopian literature. It's this agonizing tug of war. As our editor learned, on one hand, there's a deep desire to preserve ancient, unifying traditions. But on the other hand, there's this urgent, often forced, and violent push toward modernization. Writers found themselves in totally uncharted territory, trying to figure out exactly what pieces of their culture to carry forward and what excess baggage to just leave behind in order to survive the modern world.
Out of this massive conflict, emerged what's known as the literature of engagement. These writers engaged deeply and courageously with their society's flaws. They used poetry and novels to critique everything, from arranged marriages and prostitution to government corruption and police brutality. And they did all of this knowing full well that under successive authoritarian regimes, dissident voices were constantly policed. Challenging the system could literally cost you your life.
Because of that relentless violence, particularly during the period known as the Red Terror, under the Derg regime, countless Ethiopian intellectuals, artists, and everyday citizens were forced into exile. This created a massive, profound diaspora, and out of that, a whole new wave of literature was born, diaspora literature, created by people in places like Washington, D.C., Boston, and Stockholm, who were desperately attempting to make sense of their forced migration and their deep sense of loss.
Mengistu Lema's poem Basha Eshibir in America brilliantly illustrates that specific diaspora experience. It's a remarkable piece about a proud upper-class Ethiopian sent to Washington, D.C. on a government assignment who suddenly confronts the harsh, undeniable realities of American racism. It perfectly and tragically captures the dizzying culture shock of leaving an uncolonized homeland.
Just listen to the dark irony in these lines. The colors of my flag that adorned my lapel were admired for beauty, but awe nor fear did they inspire. The protagonist desperately tries to explain his noble biblical lineage. He's descended from the Queen of Sheba, but he quickly realizes that to prejudiced eyes in America, his history means absolutely nothing. His noble background offers exactly zero protection from being racially profiled and thrown in jail alongside Black Americans.
Meanwhile, across the globe, another totally unique diaspora experience was unfolding. Over in Israel, Ethiopian immigrants known as the Beta Israel were navigating their own complex transition. Returning to what they viewed as a historic homeland after centuries in Africa, they faced severe cultural clashes and major identity crises in a highly modern, fast-paced society. And how did they cope with all this? Through spontaneous, intimate storytelling. In these small community gatherings, they used cathartic, explosive laughter. They shared deeply funny, self-deprecating stories about their own assimilation, very often making the newly arrived self the butt of the joke. This bittersweet humor became a powerful, reflexive tool. It helped them navigate the dizzying clash between the traditional, rural past they had just left behind and the modern, urban landscape they suddenly found themselves in.
By actively listening to these modern voices, whether it's political critiques written under the shadow of dictatorship or diaspora poetry grappling with racism and identity, we, just like our traveling editor, finally move past the monolithic Western myth. We stop seeing just the illuminated manuscripts and the ancient empires, and we actually begin to see the true, complex, and incredibly resilient interiority of Ethiopian culture today.
So I want to leave you with a final, provocative thought. Think about other places in the world that we so easily label as ancient or traditional. How might your own perceptions be hiding their vibrant, modern realities? The story of modern Ethiopian literature proves that if we only look for romanticized myths, we completely miss out on the living, breathing, and fiercely engaged voices of the modern world. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning what you think you know.